Hey everyone, I'm Chris Carter. This is the Locked On Steelers podcast, and we have a lot to talk about. After the DK Metcalf trade, what does that say about the Steelers quarterback plan, as they haven't signed anyone just yet? Can DK Metcalf and George Pickens coexist? We also talk about the new vision for the offense, and of course, it's Mock Draft Monday, all here on an action-packed episode of the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things in the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. Thank you for making us your first listen every day, because we're your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. More on them later. All right, Steelers fans. Happy Monday. And what a Monday it is, because Sunday night was insane. And of course, I'm talking about the big move, the Steelers trading their second round pick to the Seattle Seahawks for star wide receiver DK Metcalf. There's also a flip of 7th and 6th round picks, neither here nor there. But a huge shakeup. Omar Khan going to town, making the big move, and the move comes with a big new contract. They're signing DK Metcalf to a long-term deal, $150 million over the next 5 years, averaging out at $30 million per year. We'll see how that plays out as far as when that money kicks in, what's guaranteed and what's not. But the bottom line is, if you saw my instant reaction, you can go back, and if you didn't see my instant reaction, go ahead and check that out. It's the most previous episode on this channel, whether you're listening to it on a podcast or watching on YouTube. But that's what we're going to do here today. We're not going to react to it again. Instead, we're going to talk about what this means for the Steelers offense, not just this year, but moving forward. And first, let's acknowledge the type of player that DK Metcalf is. He's a freak athlete and a dangerous vertical threat and a big-time playmaker, readily available. And that's how he's been used primarily, especially last year. According to Next Gen Stats, if you look up his numbers, 53.6% of Metcalf's routes that he ran last season were verticals, just straight go get it, go down the field, go make a play. And that was the highest rate of vertical routes that he had run in his entire career. And according to Pro Football Focus, his 32 targets on the season on passes when he was targeted, when the ball had to travel 20 yards or more down the field, that was the most in the NFL last season. But by far during the regular season, and he was only tied by Terry McLaurin when you included playoff stats. Also, all 5 of DK Metcalf's touchdowns last season came on deep balls, passes that went 20 yards or more or further down the field. He was also tied for the 3rd most deep ball touchdowns in the NFL, and 14 of his 32 targets that he was thrown to on deep balls were contested by a defender. He won 6 of those contested catch situations for a rate of 42.6%, a very good rate. It's only slightly higher than George Pickens' 41.7% on contested deep balls. That to be said, DK Metcalf, isn't, some people are going to say, well, he's not the greatest route runner. Yeah, he's not super shifty. You know why? Because he's going to beat you with his size and his athleticism. He's not going to have sharp footwork that shakes you out of your stance, because he doesn't need to. He's big, he's fast, he's physical, he's a threat that can bully you up and down the field and force cornerbacks to have to back off on honor his size, his athleticism, and his skills. So, what does that mean for the Steelers' plan on offense? Well, for one, it means get ready for more deep balls and passing, that type of passing game to open up, especially if the team keeps George Pickens. Now, Pickens was right behind Metcalf with 31 targets on passes that traveled 20 or more yards, and led the NFL with 577 receiving yards on those types of passes throughout the season. If the two were to play together this season, teams would have to consistently honor both as major deep threats and big play threats each time they were on the field. Now, we will get to, in the next segment, we will get to whether or not George Pickens will be with the Steelers next season, because there's a chance that, hey, if you're paying DK Metcalf this kind of money, you might not pay George Pickens, big money on his next contract, and you might want to trade it. He might want to be traded. That's neither here nor there. We'll discuss that in a bit. But trading for Metcalf and having Pickens at the same time would signal to any quarterback that the Steelers got that they have weapons of mass destruction ready to go in the offense. You throw in a Pat Freiermuth, a speedster like Calvin Austin, a random card like Roman Wilson, if he turns out to be there, and if the run game picks up with the investments made in the offensive line, that's a good situation for almost any quarterback to be in. And that right there is the entire point. If your first question is, why haven't the Steelers signed a quarterback? And let's face it, that's what we're all wondering, right? Why haven't the Steelers signed a quarterback yet? What's taking them so long? Most likely, it's because they probably have had an offer into Justin Fields. It's been clear from things that I've heard, things that we've heard from other people we've had on the show, guests, other writers, beat writers, everybody, that the Steelers and Justin Fields, they wanted to make something happen. But Justin Fields wants to see what he can make on the open market. The Steelers aren't going to pay him a ton of money. And so it's a reasonable and smart thing on his part to do. And it's also reasonable and smart for the Steelers to not try to overpay Justin Fields when they're trying to load up this roster. And allow me to explain that, because I think some people out there are like, just give him whatever he wants. That's not what you want to do right now. You want to be smart with how you're managing your finances to spread the money around the right way to build the roster that you want. If you're wondering why the Steelers traded for Metcalf before signing a QB, it's because building the offense with better talent is the priority. It's always been the priority. It's not just to sign a quarterback and just build around them regardless of who they are, because you should never build your offense around or based off of a quarterback that you don't think and you don't have a full confidence in to be a franchise quarterback right off the bat. If the current options that the Steelers have that are readily available to sign or move forward with at quarterback right now are bridge quarterback options like Justin Fields or Russell Wilson or Sam Darnold, who, by the way, Diana Rossini of The Athletic did say that she has a source that says that the Steelers are going to offer Sam Darnold a contract sometime today. We'll see if that comes to pass, and we'll also see if that means he's going to be a backup or the starter. But the idea of like a Sam Darnold type might be the shining example of, and if you look at what Sam Darnold did last season, this might be the shining example of what exactly the Steelers are trying to do on offense and at quarterback. I'll explain that in the next segment and why it might be actually a good sign that George Pickens' future with the team might not be immediately in doubt, and how that also relates to Arthur Smith's past offenses that performed at a high clip. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Intuit TurboTax. Taxes were waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get your any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is just matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives you your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. We're back here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue with our show talking about the Steelers offense now that they do have DK Metcalf locked in to be a future part of their team here. I ended last segment with a segue coming from Sam Darnold to go into this segment for a reason, because I want you to look at what he did with the Vikings last year. And I think that'll kind of inform you on how the Steelers see the potential development of their offense this season. If you look at Sam Darnold last year, he threw for over 4,300 yards, 35 touchdowns and only 12 interceptions. Those are all career bests. He lit it up last season. But nobody who was paying attention was disillusioned to believe that Darnold had become a superstar overnight, or he had figured it out, or that he was the new Patrick Mahomes or anything like that. You realize he was playing with a really good offensive line, and he had one of the best wide receiver tandems in the NFL with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. Those wide receivers made his life so much easier because they could just regularly beat top cornerbacks anytime they lined up against the Vikings, and that made it made it easier for Darnold to just trust those guys, throw the ball, and they were going to make plays happen. And in fact, if you looked at their numbers last year, Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison combined for 2,408 receiving yards out of Darnold's 4,319. That's 58% of his passing yards. Throw in their tight end, TJ Hawkinson, who even missed about, I'd say, a third of the season. He had 455 yards. You throw in those top three, that's 66.3% of Sam Darnold's passing yards are three prolific receiving threats. I believe that if the Steelers were to keep George Pickens, this would be the entire point of whether they get Darnold or Wilson or Fields or Daniel Jones. Name a guy, that's out there right now, because none of them are people that I think anyone is thinking is going to be the long-term franchise guy, unless you think that Justin Fields is that guy and you really believe in that. That's your right to. I'm not. I think that he can get that someday if he keeps working on it. But right now, he's not that. I think we can all acknowledge that. And that's what the Steelers are looking at right now, though, is right now you can build a roster that you can do the kind of things the Vikings did with their offense with a guy like Sam Darnold, who's a mid-tier quarterback, and move forward with it. They want to, and that's what the Steelers are trying to do right now. They want a quarterback on their roster who can be a solid playmaker, be a good veteran, and keep the offense together and keep it on task. But they don't want to have to pay a ton of money of that, so that way they can invest in these other playmakers for now, so that they can make life easier on whatever middle of the road quarterback veteran they do end up with this season. And listen, you still want a good one, you still want the one that fits you the best, right? But the point is to not try to shut down your other options or your other chances by trying to chase down a big contract for a guy that you're going to be way overpaying, and then miss out on the chance to complete your roster. The Steelers could have DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Pat Freiermuth, just like the Vikings had Jefferson, Addison, and Hawkinson. Both trios with the ideas of making life easier for a middle-of-the-road quarterback in an offense where he can just say, hey, you know what? I can trust that these guys are consistently going to beat the guy man in front of them, and if they're in one-on-one coverage, I can put the ball in a reasonable spot, and they're going to do the rest. It can simplify the offense and make things easy there. And let's not forget, this is what Omar Khan, when we talked about it, if you're wondering, well, wait a minute, Chris, you're saying a lot of this as if George Pickens is staying. I'm not saying he is for sure, but let's not forget, this is what Omar Khan said when I asked him about George Pickens when we were at the Combine back in February.
Speaking of receivers, George Pickens is entering the last year of his rookie deal, and typically when you guys have a guy like that, they've done a hold in or something's happened there. What's the outlook on you guys' plans for him moving forward with the team?
Sure, I had a really solid exit meeting with GP, and I can tell you that he has a desire to be great. He has a desire to be great here. We have a desire for him to be great and to be great here. We'll see, with respect to the contract, we won't discuss that publicly, and usually those things are addressed at a later date.
Now, that's Omar Khan with his GM speak, right? And last year, Omar Khan told us they had full faith in Kenny Pickett, and then a few weeks later, they signed Russell Wilson, and then Kenny Pickett didn't want to be around anymore, and they traded him away. So, take that for what you will. But I do think there's a good chance that the Steelers might be saying, hey, you know what? Let's not just part ways with Pickens just yet. Let's not do that right away. And if you think back to their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith, in his best years at Tennessee, and their offense when they played very well, which is what built his reputation, leading him to being a head coach. He did have that offensive line. He did have Derrick Henry, but he also had two big playmaker outside wide receivers to make it easier for Ryan Tannehill, his quarterback. Those receivers were A.J. Brown and Corey Davis. bigger body guys who can make big plays. Now, this is not me saying that George Pickens' future is entirely safe because of what happened with the Titans back in 2020 or because of what Omar Khan said in Indianapolis, but and because again, he has a checkered history with the Steelers. Like, you look at, he has plenty of big plays where he's awesome and he makes amazing stop plays. And you're like, man, that guy could be the best receiver in the NFL if he puts it all together. But then he has not great moments on and off the field where he's not blocking, in a key situation, or he's late to the start of the warm-ups before the game. There's things like that. And the Steelers are giving him every chance to improve. I'm not saying that he's doomed to not be a good player or not to be a consistent guy that should be worth a major wide receiver contract in the NFL. I'm not saying that he's not that. But I do think that if you look at what the Steelers have right now, signing DK Metcalf puts them in a position where they have that star receiver. And typically, in my opinion, in the NFL, you pay one star wide receiver, and then you try to draft other guys around him so you could have other playmaker wide receivers to build around so that you can make life easier on your offense, and you have multiple playmakers, but you're paying one wide receiver that top bill money. But if the Steelers can sign a veteran quarterback for a low enough rate that allows you to not have to spend big there, and maybe you can have DK Metcalf at the rate that you have him now, and then maybe you can work something out with Pickens, whether it's a franchise tag next year, whether it's some sort of deal that keeps him around for a few years, and you can make those two a duo for the foreseeable future. And that could be a great situation to be in, especially if you're not paying a whole lot for the veteran quarterback that you're keeping around. Because again, remember, you're not trying to overspend on just having a mid-level quarterback. You would like to overspend on giving your mid-level quarterback one of the best wide receiver duos in the NFL. And I think if Metcalf and Pickens were to stay together, that's what they would be, much like Addison and Jefferson. Now, granted, Justin Jefferson, I think, better than DK Metcalf. And I think you could go here or there about Addison and Pickens on things. But again, I think the plan for the Steelers has always been for this offseason to not be the season where they make the big move to try to jump up in what's widely perceived as a bad quarterback draft, to try to reach and get a player there, kind of like how they did with Kenny Pickett in the first round of the 2022 NFL draft. But instead, you can set yourself up where maybe if they're finding a way to keep George Pickens, and maybe also this season you're evaluating George Pickens. Like if by the middle of the year he checks out or he's not doing well, you could try to swing him for a trade like you did for Chase Claypool, and then you revisit that next year with what you want to do at wide receiver, and know that you have DK Metcalf as a number one wide receiver. But let's say that you do have George Pickens going into next year, and you do like your situation, and you say, you know what? The quarterback signed for not that expensive of a deal. We've got all our other pieces in place. We're ready to go. Let's make the move. Let's lock him in for like a 2-3 year deal, something like that, and keep him and DK Metcalf together. Then, if you're able to go all in for a quarterback in next year's draft, again 2026, the one that's coming to Pittsburgh, imagine your new star rookie quarterback with a more developed offensive line that you've sunk a lot of draft capital into, that you're probably going to sign a guy next year to replace Isaac Seumalo. You've got a stronger run game because of that offensive line's improvements. And then you also have those playmaker wide receivers in Pickens and Metcalf, and of course, Pat Freiermuth. And if the defense is still playing at a high level, all of a sudden you're in a good spot with a rookie quarterback who can learn behind whatever bridge quarterback you signed, who's probably on the second year of a 2-year deal. And then you can say, hey, bridge quarterback, you're the vet, set the tone. It's your job until that guy's ready to pass you, and then they're going to pass it on. Or who knows, maybe they just jump right to it. But that to me is the vision or the model that the Steelers need to follow to get back to being a dangerous team. They're a good team. They're a solid team. They've made the playoffs 4 of the last 5 years. Making the playoffs, you're good. But to be very good, to be exceptional, to be great, you got to win playoff games. And that's what they haven't done. And they haven't been that for some time now. And if they want to take the step forward, that is the very model that the Steelers used when they drafted Ben Roethlisberger. They had an offensive line. They had a run game. They had playmakers like Hines Ward, Plaxico Burress, Antoine Randall, and they were able to bring Ben Roethlisberger into it. And they said, hey, Ben, we're going to give you some situations where you just got to make a big play, but it's not going to be a super complex offense because the run game can take over a lot. And by the way, they had a kick butt defense, which is what the Steelers are still trying to have, and probably they're still a top 10 defense this past year. They want to get back into the top 5 this next year, which is why I still think the plan should be invest in the defensive line. But again, that's what could make you a dangerous team. If the Steelers were to line up, I want you to picture this in the offense. If the Steelers were to line up DK Metcalf and George Pickens on the opposite sides of the field, each lining up on the outsides of the formation, split end flanker on either side. Team defenses that they face will have to honor them as deep threats almost every time they're on the field, and you think it could potentially be a pass, whether it's play action or not. And that means you could have deep safeties on both sides of the field where those guys are lined up, saying, hey, can't let George Pickens get one-on-one with our cornerbacks because he can moss anybody. Can't let DK Metcalf do it because he can get behind anybody with his 4.35 speed, in the 40-yard dash. So when teams are doing that, if the Steelers can force teams to have to honor that with 2 deep safeties, dropping back, all of a sudden that means you have 2 deep safeties and you have 2 cornerbacks on them. That's 4 guys not in the box. What does that mean? Most you can have in the box is 7 players. All of a sudden you have lighter boxes, and that allows for the run game to have more space to attack. That allows them to get more aggressive, and maybe the offensive line can do a little bit more damage than what they've been facing with loaded boxes over the past several years. My point is, even as a person who myself, if you followed me, I theorized for a while now that the Steelers could be planning to move on from George Pickens based off of the antics and the things that we've heard. And several of my colleagues have said there's no way they sign him to a long-term deal. We've heard that, and I hear that, and I see, but I also see there is a strong case to keep him if this is the plan. He's expressed interest in staying. He's when people say, joked about him on Instagram saying, oh, he's going to be out of here, he was like, yeah, he got jokes on you, buddy, and he made up a post about that. I think that there's been some indications that he might feel his job is safe. That could also be the Steelers giving him a false sense of security and just trying to keep him happy until they move on. Because again, last year, Omar Khan spoke highly of Kenny Pickett last year at the Combine right before the madness unfolded, and then he went to Philadelphia, and the Steelers had Justin Fields and Russell Wilson as their quarterbacks. But it could also just be the team knowing that they have a chance to load up on talent and make this offense give this offense the best collection of talent it's had since maybe 2018 or 2017. And that's what the Steelers could be doing. If they're able to find a running back in this draft class to pair with Jaylen Warren, and the offensive line takes a step forward, and they keep both Metcalf and Pickens, and then you have Pat Freiermuth, and again, you still have Calvin Austin, you still have Roman Wilson, and you're adding there. You could have a collection of talent that if a mid-tier quarterback is on your roster, you're just saying to them, hey, make the reasonable play. Give these guys chances to make plays, and they'll make the plays for you, and that can be enough with the Steelers defense that if it gets back to elite level, I think it was just slightly below elite last year. As again, top 10 is very good, but if they can get back to elite levels and you have this kind of a core on offense, there could be something there to make this team a much more dangerous team moving forward much sooner than rather than later. So all that being said, we'll keep an eye on other moves that could be coming. Who knows? By the time you're watching this, maybe they've signed a quarterback, and I'm already doing another emergency episode. But we'll keep up to date with that. We got to take a quick break. When we come back, it's time to talk about Mock Draft Monday because we got another winner for that, and I have a special announcement coming at the end of the next segment. So keep it here with the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We'll be right back. But first, I remind you this show is also brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. That's 200 extra bucks that you can use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets as March Madness gets rolling. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. Personally, I say every year, March Madness is the best tournament in all the sports, and I love the action. I can't get enough of it. I'm sad that I'm not going to be able to cover it anymore. With Pitt not being in the tournament this year, but the FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. And remember, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. That's on FanDuel. Check out FanDuel.com. FanDuel, the #1 sportsbook in America. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, I'm your host, Chris Carter. We continue our show here. All right, through all that madness and the insanity of the Steelers trading for DK Metcalf, we had to adjust our Mock Draft Monday post because we always search for your mock drafts and to talk about your picks each Monday to kind of go along with the theme, get just to talking more about more different draft picks and how the drafts could fall. So we explore all the scenarios. Well, plenty of you guys, I think I had over 100 submissions before the draft, and I only before the trade happened, and I only posted maybe like posted the mock draft Monday post maybe a few hours before it happened, and you guys went nuts with it. And then when the trade happened, you guys went nuts again and submitted even more. So thank you to everyone who participates in it, because it's a lot of fun and we like to do it on here on the show. The good thing is plenty of you guys recognize, hey, Chris is going to want to do a mock draft that includes this trade. So I'm glad that plenty of y'all came back. So without further ado, this week's winner of the Mock Draft Monday contest is none other than Greg Blunt. Congratulations, Greg. I really liked your draft here. Now I'll point something out. Greg, you did some double dipping because you submitted your picks via Twitter and in our Facebook group. But hey, there's nothing wrong with that. We actually appreciate that. It makes it easier for me to sort things out. But congratulations to you, Greg. So let's go through Greg's picks here. Now, Greg did something here that I really like, especially off of the heels of the DK Metcalf trade, because Greg did a trade with the Commanders, moving back to the 29th spot in the first round and recouping a day 2 pick in getting the 61st pick of the draft. Now, I'm not so certain that you could get the 61st overall pick just by moving back 8 spots in the first round, unless someone was really aggressive. When I looked at like the trade charts and how that works, I think that would be a little that's a little generous to the Steelers there. But hey, you know what? We're gonna just simply let it move up, let it happen right now. Let's just explore it, because I do think this part of the Steelers' strategy moving forward is going to be finding a way to recoup at least a day 2 pick. If it's not a second round pick, maybe a third round pick, so that they have 2 picks on day 2 of this draft, and they can be sure to address some of the strengths of this draft, whether it's at running back or other positions they see being valuable there. So with that being said, Greg traded back from the 21st pick, got the 29th pick. He used the 29th pick on from the Commanders on defensive lineman Darius Alexander out of Toledo. We've talked about him with Alan Saunders. A lot to like about Darius Alexander. Very athletic, plays really hard. Is built very, very well. If you're asking me, I think he's like right on the fringe of being one of those top 5 defensive linemen. I wouldn't put him above Walter Nolan or Derek Harmon or Kenneth Grant or, of course, Mason Graham, but I'd put him right after that group. And I think that that's still a fine place to be. And I think that he could be still be a really good NFL player who could be part of the Steelers revamping of their defensive front to become a more dominant and physical defensive front. So with that, he took Darius Alexander there. And then with the second round pick that he traded with the Commanders to get the 61st overall pick, he went and got cornerback out of Iowa State, Darian Porter, who I personally like a lot. He's 6'4", 6'3". He runs really well, tested very well at the combine. I think both of these guys are well-testing athletes, and these are guys that honestly could both garner first-round consideration. Porter might end up being gone before this pick, but still, I thought the idea was right on point. You get a young D tackle, you get a young corner that can grow into being that man shutdown guy next to Joey Porter Jr. And then maybe you have Porter and Porter. Maybe they're like a law firm that you have shutting down receivers for years to come. So Those were solid picks. Then Greg went and threw it in the third round, a solid zone running back in DJ Giddens out of Kansas State. I thought that was a solid pick. Giddens, a guy that I think could be an interesting fit. He would still play behind Jaylen Warren, but could be a guy that develops in Arthur Smith's offense and gives you a nice change of pace with Jaylen Warren. Then in the fourth round, he got a guy that I really like in the fourth round. I think is a good fit for the Steelers, and Will Howard at quarterback. And you have he has the makings of, I think, of being a solid like Mason Rudolph type of guy, but that's just my thoughts there on Will Howard. Then the final picks here, Greg went and got Connor Colby, guard out of Iowa. I think it's good to get a guard somewhere in day 3 because they could use another depth piece there, and maybe if they can swing another lucky hit on like a Mason McCormick, maybe they have their offensive line for the future. Then Greg went and double dipped at defensive line in the 6th round, going in Cam Horsley out of Boston College. I thought that was pretty solid. And then finishing up with tight end Oronde Gadsden, the 2nd out of Syracuse, and safety Hunter Wohler, both the 7th round picks for the Steelers there. So there you have it, a solid draft from Greg. Congratulations to Greg, and thank you to everyone who participates in Mock Draft Monday. It's always fun to read through your picks and to go through things and to explore. Okay, what do I want to talk about today, and how does this relate to what we were talking about? And I especially thank all of you who came back and still submitted picks again, or just made sure to get your picks in after the DK Metcalf trade, so we could have new submissions and to talk about those things. So thanks again. That's another Mock Draft Monday wrapped up. Now it's time for the special announcement that I said throughout this show that we were going to make. You guys know I work here on the Locked On Steelers podcast, but I wear many hats. I do a lot of work for Channel 11, but I'm also a writer primarily for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. You guys know I take a lot of pride in my role as a writer and a storyteller for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And I say I'm from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette at the top of every show that I do here. So as of today, if you know me, I cover 3 teams primarily: the Steelers, Pitt football, and Pitt basketball. But as of today, I am no longer going to be a Pitt beat writer for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. That's because starting this morning, I am now a full-time Steelers reporter, beat reporter for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. For those who have followed me since my days at BehindTheSteelCurtain.com or at DK Pittsburgh Sports or Pittsburgh Sports Now, this has been a long journey of mine to get to where I'm at right here and right now. I have to say I'm proud of the people I've worked with, the work we've done together, the stories that we've covered on the Pitt beat. And there are many amazing people that they know who they are around the Pitt athletics department, with many have great stories to be told, both student athletes, coaches, or administrators. And I'm honored to have been able to share some of those stories with you guys over the years in the work that I've done at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But now I'm also truly honored to become a full-time Steelers reporter for the paper of record in my hometown, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I mean, it sounds like it right now because I'm recording this very late night after a very long day, but I am overwhelmed and overjoyed that I've gotten to this point in my career. And I'm excited about being able to put my full focus into the Steelers after having to cover 3 teams at the same time over the past five years. And so I am overjoyed about this opportunity and excited about what it means moving forward. Best of all, you're still going to get me here on the Locked On Steelers podcast every day, Monday through Friday, bringing you my insights, my thoughts, bringing with guests, and a whole lot more, while still getting all my great work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And in fact, it'll give me more time to put things on the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette to reference on this very show, and also to check me out on the North Shore Drive podcast right there at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. So I want to say a big thank you to everyone who supported me in this journey, whether you're a friend or a family member who has been by my side and helped me. Big shout out to my fiance who puts up with my craziness every single day. Whether even just you're just a fan who has clicked on my articles, listened to my podcast, watched my videos, or simply, like, there were 2 fans, I'm sorry I forget your names right now, who said they love my work at the Pitt basketball game that I covered on Saturday, which turns out to be my last Pitt basketball game. I thank you all, because you all have been a big part of the journey, and it's a big part of a journey that's still ongoing. I think that's the exciting part of this, is that I hope you guys get to stay along for the ride, because I still plan for this to be a long, fun journey ahead of us, covering sports, covering a sport that I love in the town that I grew up in. And I can't wait to keep going and to keep showing you guys what we're going to have in store here at Locked On Steelers and, of course, at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But we'll be back tomorrow with more here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter. Again, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the social medias at Carter Critiques. Read my work at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, which will soon be purely Steelers coverage. If you want to get on my work there, we're going to try to get some film studies out on DK Metcalf soon. Keep it here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with a full episode. Who knows? Maybe we have a quarterback to talk about. Find out here on the Locked On Steelers podcast.